You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, I know you put it out there on Twitter. How's the weather up there in Iowa?
Well, I'm sitting in a dark room right now. When we start the podcast, the sun is up, and now I'm sitting in complete darkness outside of the light from my screen and maybe the light from my phone when I kind of mess around on Twitter. You know, I'm pretty active on there. But, yeah, we got another snowstorm coming our way, and there's going to be another one this weekend, and there's supposed to be another one next week. And I swear to God, this is the truth. There are cities in eastern Iowa and western Illinois that are in a quote-unquote crisis because they have legitimately run out of salt. So like what do you do? Like I
abundant resources in our world.
Yeah, I mean, just like I think it's like there's a point where storage is an issue, and kind of trying to bring in more, and like you don't want to have too much where you're sitting on it and everything, because I mean you still have to store it, but there's been so much constant snow and cold and ice in this area of the Midwest this year that there are cities that are out of salt. So, yikes. And it's supposed to get, I mean, they're talking about 8 inches tonight through tomorrow at 3 p.m. So, yeah, here we are. Please, God, get me to April. Forget about the draft, man. I just need the sun. I actually went hiking last weekend because it was nice. It was still 20 degrees, but it was quote unquote nice out. So the sun was out. So we went hiking, did about 5 miles. But my God, man, this has been a long winter.
Oh, I understand completely. We're snowing right now, and we're not supposed to get quite 8 inches, but we're still getting some. And I was laughing. My daughter the other day, she was like, "Dad, when are we going golfing again?" And I said, "I don't know. I wish I do. I wish we could be going today." And it was about 42 out, and we were really debating about going golfing. And unfortunately, the wind picked up on us, but we had to get away from it. But we're back to football, and we got plenty to be talking about these days because it's the crazy busy offseason. And so we want to make sure that everybody can find us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH and Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. You can follow the podcast Twitter account at HuddleUpPod, and make sure to subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles on all things pertain to your Denver Broncos. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, Nick, I mean, obviously the big news in Bronco country is the Broncos trading for Joe Flacco. And it's been about a week. It kind of happened right after we did our podcast, of course.
Yeah, right. Like Chad and Zach got all in the hot takes, and I'm mad about it. Well, I'm happy about it. So now we got to be all calm and boring, and anything we say is just echoed off of them. But yeah, no, I was actually a little bit upset that happened the day after. Yeah.
So goes the NFL world, I guess. Wednesdays are always the crazy day.
But yeah, no, since we didn't get a talk last week, Carl, I'm curious, we're going to talk a little bit about Flacco today, and more of that as it pertains to building the Broncos, because that's what we're here for. But I'm curious about your initial thoughts and a little bit of hindsight bias there, but initial thoughts and where you sit today on this move.
Oh, a month ago when the whole Joe Flacco rumor started, I was sitting there going, please, no, God, please, not Joe Flacco. And it's just a little bit more, one of the worst moments for me as a Bronco fan was that playoff game against Flacco. I mean, it was such a terrible moment. I was living in Seattle, and that Hail Mary pass, I was working that day, and everybody that were Seahawks fans couldn't wait to tell me what the Ravens had just done. And so I just felt like I had a whole entire city against me. And I got my revenge the next day because the Seahawks lost at the last minute. So it felt a little bit better. I was the only person smiling in Seattle that day. But it's still, that Flacco play just stings. Now, my initial thought when it happened was, this makes complete sense, especially if the Broncos are wanting to go after Drew Lock. because Case Keenum is nowhere in the stratosphere of what Locke likes to do. And I like Case Keenum, how much effort he gives. I love that he is a positive guy. I think he's a good guy in the locker room, all those kind of things. But I really feel like if you kept Case Keenum and drafted Locke, I feel like you'd be really hurting Locke's growth, because you'd have to be practicing two very different styles of offense. Where with Joe Flacco, day one, you can hit the ground and say, this is exactly what we're going to do for both quarterbacks. So, again, that's why it makes a lot of sense to me. Joe Flacco's a better quarterback. I think if you get Case Keenum traded, really price-wise, they're about the same if you would have just kept Case Keenum. So, again, it just when you step back from the emotional side of it all and how much every Bronco fan hates Joe Flacco, you feel a little bit better about it. At least that's kind of the way I take it. What about you?
Yeah, for me, I think it is. I mean, if you go back and listen to the podcast after the Broncos announced that they were going to sign Case Keenum, I was very much a detractor. You were, I think, a little bit. You were as well, but not as much as I was. I just felt like Case Keenum was an extremely limiting player, and he didn't have the tools. And gosh, I've just been hoping for some explosive down the field passing that Broncos haven't had since, let's be completely honest, Jay Cutler. I did enjoy the Bronco years, but again, that was more of a guy playing elite point guard to some pretty good weapons in hindsight. Not that being obviously 55 touchdowns. That's incredible stuff, but I don't think that's pretty much everybody's like, this quarterback like Dwayne Haskins can be incredible because look at Tom Brady. Okay, well, you're saying Dwayne Haskins going to be one of the best short-term passing or short field passing game mental processors in the NFL ever? Because that's pretty much what you have to go with when you have those declining tools. Mm-hmm. But I think with Flacco, again, Flacco does have some declining tools as well, but he's a guy that I think he can be good in this offense. He can work that short passing game, and he can hit those tighter window throws outside the hash marks over the middle, the seam route, which Keenum was intercepted like 3 or 4 times because he just threw up waffles. I don't know what to call those type of balls. It kind of look like a wiffle ball kind of stuff, just floating, ducking around up there, and can push the ball vertically. So I think that it is a good move. And when you look at the cost, $18.5 million, you hopefully can move on from Keenum, even if you have to lose some trade value to do that, packaging the 6th with Keenum to get a 7th to get that extra $7 million in cap space. I think they can and will get that done. And I think at the cost of a 4th round pick to get a guy that you feel better about, that can run the offense more so than with what you want, and move on from Kubiak and the get that was Case Keenum, because make no mistake, that was Kubiak's guy. I think it's worth it. 4th round pick, you can go back in history and find some good day 3 picks, but for the most part, those guys wash out. There's more undrafted players playing in the NFL than there are day 3 picks by a long shot. So I think the potential there and the scheme fit that you can go with a guy and get at least some flexibility, some leverage when it comes to the draft of the quarterback position, I think it's worth it. You have to remember just 3 years ago now, the Broncos went into the draft and their penciled in quarterback was Mark flipping Sanchez. We're in a better situation than that. So, granted, that was a conditional pick that the Broncos didn't have to give up, but still, I think you're in a better situation than that. So I don't think that Flacco, if you're looking at Flacco as the guy going forward, you think, the Broncos are back, Super Bowl contenders. This is the answer. Well, that's one thing. That's not what I'm saying at all. But is it a step in the right direction? Does it solidify the offense a little more? Does it help open up everything because that quarterback has more talent? Yes. And above everything else, it helps you wash your hands of Case Keenum, which I am all about. So there you go. At me on Twitter if you don't like it. Come at me. I know that Eric and Ben Albright has also been big Case Keenum defenders. I've been very much a detractor, and I'm happy to be moving on to one thing I got to say, and I've been on a monologue here for a second, but looking at Jeff Esray's piece, who's a friend of the podcast, good guy, friend of yours, he did a piece this week, and he talked about Flacco's better of more of a see it, throw it type of quarterback as opposed to a rhythm and timing passer, and most of the time he's able to compensate it with the arm. But he's definitely more tailored for a vertical play action game than a quick passing timing offense. And that's just so true. I think that's on the dot. And you saw Flacco in 2014 in that system with Gary Kubiak, more 21 and 12 personnel than 11 personnel, which we should be seeing in Denver. But really, I just think he's a better fit for what they want to do and should open up the offense more so. How big of an upgrade, that's yet to be seen, but I think it's a step in the right direction, and I can't be upset about that.
Right. I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was watching some of the plays that Flacco was able to make that Keenum can't. One of the worst plays that just kept frustrating me because the Broncos kept going back to it, even though Case Keenum can't make the throw, is that seam route to the tight end. And especially when you get down to the red zone, they kept trying to hit that pass over and over and over again. It kept leading to turnovers or really bad plays. And then you watch Joe Flacco go in there and throw that same pass where you really have to one, commit to it because it's going to be a tight window throw. And two, you got to kind of throw it a little bit earlier to make sure that front defender doesn't turn around and pick it off. And Flacco, with his arm talent, he just has the ability to actually squeeze that kind of pass in there. And I can't remember if it was Sanders or somebody who was talking about this whole trade. He kept saying now teams have to defend every inch of the field. And I think that's just so true of you saw there at the end of the year. You want to know why Philip Lindsay started not producing like he was earlier in the year? Teams didn't respect the deep ball one bit. They loaded up.
Sanders was gone.
Right, exactly. Once Sanders was gone, especially. And so it was just easy to load up the box and say, Case Keenum beat us over the top. And what we saw was Case Keenum can't beat him over the top. Joe Flacco at least offers a guy that can do something like that. So I think we still need a few more pieces, which is something we're going to talk about here today. But overall, I do think the Broncos got better. And like you said, for a cost of a fourth-round pick, I've seen some people going, oh, my gosh, that's crazy how much value they got for Joe Flacco. And I'm going, really, a fourth-round pick? Like you said, there's more undrafted guys in the NFL right now than there are those fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh-round pick guys. So,
not that they're meaningless.
Right.
Don't get confused about that. But, I mean, the Broncos had an extra one to play with. So you got a chance to improve at quarterback and give yourself a bridge to something else and a guy that is a better scheme fit. I don't think, and a contract. We need to talk about how flexible the contract is. I mean, zero guaranteed money. It's essentially a 1 year deal, one after another for the next 3 years, where the Broncos have like almost there's no ramifications for moving on from it. I think the risk is so incredibly low, and the risk to upside is so incredibly low and high for the upside that I just can't see how people can be that upset about it other than you don't like Joe Flacco.
Right.
Or if you're expecting John Elway and Peyton Manning, that's
right.
Something else we can talk about too. But I think that what you're getting, if your expectations are realistic, what they gave up and the return for the cost and everything like that is, I can't imagine being that upset about it.
Right. No, I'm right there with you. And so let's get into this a little bit. We wanted to talk today. What do the Broncos need to do to maybe build an offense around Joe Flacco? Because there is a really good chance that Joe Flacco is going to be the starting quarterback week 1 for the Broncos. And so what works best with him? How can the Broncos set things up? And I guess let's start off talking maybe what the Broncos already have that helps Joe Flacco day one. And for me, strong running game. I mean, when he had his 2014 great season, obviously he had Kubiak calling plays, and Kubiak is a big-time running guy. And right now, the Broncos, the strength of that offense is ability to run the football. With Philip Lindsay, Freeman started out really well last year. We'll kind of see what he can do. Booker coming back, good third down option for the Broncos. I just really like that right now Joe Flacco has a great running back that can set up his play-action game.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we saw Joe Flacco's best season in 2014. The Ravens had a really, really good run game, and I would say that was more predicated on the offensive line than the running backs. I mean, Justin Forsett, I think he won me a fantasy league that year. Him and C.J. Anderson carried me down the stretch. I think I brought that up before. Man, those guys were getting me like 20, 25 points a game during the playoffs, and I picked them, I think, both off of waivers that year or something crazy. Maybe, I think it was 2014, honestly, when Anderson kind of came out of nowhere too. But yeah, no, he's got a good set of running backs here. I was watching Thomas Hall's Inside the Numbers piece that he does for Mile High Huddle and 24/7 Sports, and over the last 4 or 5 seasons, Flacco has not had a single 1,000-yard rusher. And you got Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman, who hopefully will be better this year. He did have that ankle injury against Arizona that really hampered him down the stretch. And also a guy that I think he did face the highest proportion of runs into stacked boxes of any running back in the NFL last year. So that's a yikes, and hopefully something Flacco can quell a little bit as well. But yeah, it's an offense that, once again, it's going to be predicated on the run game. And you got to, I mean, as much as people made fun of Vance Joseph last year, this is a passing league. But when you got a quarterback like Joe Flacco, who does have some limitations, but you have a solid group of running backs, young running backs, cheap running backs, all great things. Mm-hmm. And you have an offense that ran the ball pretty effectively last year, and what it looks like a top, at worst, I would say a top 12 defense. You know, I'm not going to say they're top 10 yet. Let's see what happens this offseason. But I think that's a recipe for success. Now, the AFC West is tough. You got the Chargers, you got the Chiefs, two of arguably the three best teams in the AFC, maybe four if you include the Colts. But I think these running backs are here, and they give him a baseline of success. I mean, can you name me who the Ravens' top running back was last year?
Kenneth Dixon, maybe?
I think Kenneth Dixon got hurt. I mean, Gus Edwards, kind of a guy that came on after Lamar Jackson, but really, the running backs for the Ravens have been really bad recently. Yeah. Thank God they didn't take Phillip Lindsay. That was the other team that was almost got him, but thank you, Phillip Lindsay's mama, for telling him to stay in Colorado. But yeah, no, I think it's a good situation for him running back wise. But again, I do think that the running game, and this just might be me, but I think the running game is more predicated on the offensive line than anything else. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, before we move on from the running back position, anything that you think is maybe missing from this group? You got Booker, who's a good third down guy, can block, can catch out of the backfield, make guys miss in the open field. Lindsay, obviously, with the speed. Freeman with a little bit of power. Is there anything else they really need, or is that pretty much set for him?
Well, I wish we could meld all three guys into one. You know, somebody who can do a little bit of everything. If you could give me the speed, vision, decisiveness, ability to run between the tackles, and breakaway speed of Lindsay, and the heart, obviously, too. That's a big one. And the hair. The heart and the hair, those are the two most important things. That's how he gets his power. And then the size and some of the downhill ability, leg turning ability of Royce Freeman, and combined with the pass blocking prowess and the receiving ability, both out of the backfield and being motioned out of Devontae Booker, then you have a guy that's, I mean, a first-round capable running back. Let's be completely honest. But just kind of having those, it's nice to have the Swiss Army knife, but it would be nice if, just for the multiplicity of the offense, what are you going to do from play to play instead of showing your hand, if you could have a guy that could do multiple of those things together. But now I'm just being nitpicky, and I don't have a top 5 level running back on the team. What can you do? You can't be top 5 every single position.
Right. Well, I mean, if Pro Football Talk is right, Le'Veon Bell is on the Broncos' radar.
Yeah. I mean, he'd be fun in Madden, but I'm not paying a running back a second contract. That's another reason I never want to take one in the first round either, because I'm looking to always pay that first round pick a second contract. And if I'm using that running back correctly, I'm never paying him a second contract. I just think you can find better. Right. So that's just me.
That to me is always the sign of a true great first round pick. If you get him to that second contract, that would be I mean, there's other ways for them not to be a bust, but that's always the big sign. Hey, this is a guy we're willing to build around, and we did good. But beyond the running game, here's some other pieces that I think are really good, especially with Joe Flacco. Courtland Sutton, I think he should be jumping for joy. I'm working on an article right now, just what Sutton brings to the team, especially with a guy like Joe Flacco. There were so many plays last year where, I mean, he went out there and made plays, but it was a lot of plays he made because he just had to. Case Keenum couldn't lead him. Case Keenum couldn't hit him in stride. And so there's just a lot of comeback or jump ball opportunities. And yes, that's a strength of his. But can you imagine some of those plays where he has got 2 or 3 yards worth of separation and you hit him in stride?
Yeah, I mean, Keenum made him make the easy to moderate plays look hard, and he did it sometimes. But he left, again, phrase that I love. I think I said on the last podcast, leaving meat on the bone, and that's something that Keenum did quite often throwing to Sutton.
It just seems like a waste. And so for me, Courtland Sutton, I think, is going to be a huge player that's going to love having Joe Flacco, plus can get plays over the middle of the field. Case Keenum really struggled over the middle of the field last year. I just think that he's one of those guys that could really break out this season.
Yeah, I don't disagree. He's going to have to work on his hands over the middle. But, guy coming into his first season in the NFL, coming from SMU, getting his second year and hitting that jugs machine, hopefully. I'm expecting a pretty big year from him this year. And I'm excited to see your piece on that as well.
Yeah. That I'm hoping we'll have done tomorrow. I have some time to work on that. So I'm very, very excited for that. And then Emmanuel Sanders, it just kind of depends. Is he going to be back? Is he not going to be back? Is he going to be healthy? When's he going to be healthy? There's so many things that kind of play into that. But I always kind of think of Joe Flacco always kind of likes to have that outlet guy, the guy that he knows can make the tough catches if he just puts it in a position for the guy to go make a play. And that's Emmanuel Sanders has been doing that his entire career. Some of his catches, I'm just sitting there going, how did he hold on to that? This guy just has incredible hands, just a tenacity to go make a play that very few receivers in the NFL have. I've seen this guy, I thought his head got ripped off a couple times, and yet somehow he held on to the football and then bounces back up and goes and gets back in the huddle. And I'm going, that shouldn't happen. And so I'm really hoping he can get healthy. I just think that he would be a huge help for Flacco. Just like I said, being that third down specialist that the Broncos really need.
Yeah, we will see if he's here. That's the big question, honestly. Do you think he'll be here?
No.
Okay, well. All right.
I'm putting him here just because right now he is with the Broncos. So I'm trying to go off of what the Broncos have right now. I think that they're going to be working to get that group younger. I think if they can find any kind of trade partner for Sanders, I think they're going to go ahead and make that trade and just open up the cap all the more to add the pieces, younger pieces to this team. I still think quarterback is going to be the focus in the first round. We'll get into that more as we go through, but I love Sanders. Like I said, I love watching this guy play. He's one of my favorite receivers to watch. I know he has some off-field issues. He's a talker. He does a lot of stupid things off the field, but the energy he brings on the field is something like the Broncos saw it last year. When he went down, the entire offense was done.
Yeah, it really was.
And so not to have him this year, that be that veteran presence for the group, I think would be tough for this Broncos team.
Yeah, I do not disagree at all. I'm definitely worried about moving on from him, but a lot of talk. Sounds like he's a guy that might be out of Denver, so we'll see. It's all talk until it happens. But,
right.
That's a month ago we were like, hey, Flacco, Broncos? Really? Okay. We'll see. I guess it's all talk.
Yep.
Boom. So some of that talk, it turns out to be true. Some of it, just whispers in the wind. So we'll see.
Yeah. I ran into that earlier. I had somebody send me something from Mike Kliss asking if I thought it was true or not, and it was that the Broncos thought Joe Flacco was their quarterback for the next 3 years.
Just a day before Scangarello was saying that Keenum was their quarterback, the day before they brought in Flacco. So, yeah.
So, Sure. And Mike Kliss, he's the
mouthpiece.
Yeah, the puppet for the Broncos. So it's kind of hard to know what he's saying of what the Broncos are trying to put out there, all those kind of things. But
the way I think about Mike Kliss, I'm not going to dish on him or anything. I had, whatever. But don't take what he says to be true. Take what he says is what the Broncos want you to think. This is what we want the general media to think about what's the state of the Broncos. He's an insider. He knows, but it's more about, he's almost like an extension of the PR. If anything, rather than an insider, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. If you can view him that way, then you begin to understand his tweets a lot more.
Yeah.
And he's not quite the blow the smoke up the rear end kind of guy. No. I ran into Mike Kliss when I was down at the Senior Bowl. He was very nice to me. I thought he was a real class guy. I know a lot of people won't say that about him. I know some of his Twitter fights get hilarious. His inability to understand what DMs are compared to public tweets is hilarious and gives us a lot to talk about. But beyond that, I think he is actually a pretty nice guy. He's just, like you said, he's just kind of more of a PR guy than anything else at this point in his career.
Yeah, which is fine. But that's just, you got to view him that way. He puts out what the Broncos want you to think.
Right. And I think any of us in this business would almost trade with him if we could.
Oh,
I mean, you get to fly with the Broncos everywhere. You get to interact with all the players, coaches, everybody. So, I mean, I would take his job in a heartbeat, and I'd be a PR guy. No problem.
How high do you want me to jump, Mr. Elway? Okay, yeah. Sounds good. If you didn't like that tie, I'll never wear it again.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's. Is there any other weapons you can see on this team that you're sitting here saying this is great for Flacco? This is exactly what they need.
Well, honestly, I still am really excited about Deshaun Hamilton. I know that last year we were talking about him being a guy that, should stand out earlier than Sutton, but now that it sounds like Sanders might be moved on, we'll see about that. But Eric told us, we were talking with Eric the other day, and he said that the guy that he was talking with and source the Broncos said that, while Sutton's going to be a guy that's going to stand out, they're really expecting Hamilton to benefit from the addition of Flacco. And Hamilton was a guy that, watching the tape last year, it was frustrating to see how open he was. And, it was a timing thing. It was a getting the ball there on time kind of thing with enough mustard. And I think you're going to see that more with Flacco than you saw with Keenum. So I think Hamilton is a guy that, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. If he doesn't stand out this year, then that's on me overhyping a guy, I guess. But I really do think Hamilton is a guy that's going to stand out this year and be a surprising and solid weapon for him.
Right. Well, that was I did an article way back a few months ago or a couple months ago about Deshaun Hamilton, and somebody said, well, he only has 5 catches on the season. He's not that great of a receiver. And so a lot of my clips that I showed were times that he was wide open, nobody within 5 yards of him, and would have been an easy first down. Some of them would have been touchdowns, and Case Keenum just would not throw it to him. And so, like you said, sometimes that timing, Case Keenum's, he just wouldn't throw it over the middle.
Yeah.
He just didn't trust his arm to be able to make those window throws. And Flacco, he's one of those guys, he likes those kind of throws. So it's just, Flacco's like the opposite of Case Keenum.
Yeah.
And
Bert
so
to Ernie.
Yeah, so that can be a good thing or bad thing depending on the offense that you're running. And so we'll kind of see how that goes. But I agree, Hamilton, I think he'll be a big part of the offense. But beyond that, I'm just looking at now pieces that the Broncos are missing. And one of them that really sticks out to me that I think would be huge for Joe Flacco would be the tight end position. Because, again, a guy that can really disrupt over the middle, add that size, guy that can add some speed, make sure that those safeties and linebackers have to stay there in the middle. I think that would be just huge for the Broncos. So I guess my question to you then would be, who in the draft would you think is a really good fit for the Broncos? Or do you think that they maybe look for free agency to fix that tight end position, or both?
I think it's got to be both, right? Like, you can't really rely on Jake Butt at this point. Anything he gives you is just bonus. You took him in the 5th round because the 2nd round talent in the 5th round because you knew there was a chance that he might not be the same or he might get injured again. Well, lo and behold, here we are. He's injured again. So not sure about him. And I never really was a big fan of Troy Fumagalli. I thought he was solid, but nothing outstanding. He's
right.
kind of he's like a guy that has to play slot. Doesn't have to play slot, but he's kind of like a slot wide receiver because he's got solid hands, but he doesn't have that yak ability or elite athleticism that you see for a guy that's more of that receiving tight end. So, and he's not a good inline blocker. So it's like, where am I putting him? There's another guy that fell the 5th round and injured as well, but I just don't know if there's that much there to expect too much out of him. So I think you got to do both, honestly. Now, whether that be getting Jeff Hireman back, who is a guy that, Kubiak originally drafted to be this West Coast offense tight end. So there is something to say there about what they project him to be. But again, another guy who's had some injuries. It'll come down to contract, really. But there's other guys, maybe Jesse James, Vance McDonald, Tyler Croft. But unfortunately, Charles Clay signed with the Cardinals right away. But he was one that I was interested in. So we'll see. But I think you got to do both. And then as far as the draft goes, it probably does depend on what you do in free agency at first as well. If you get, let's say, Jesse James, for example, you probably need a better complementary piece that can be a better receiver. So that will open up the door for like a Jay Sternberger or a Dawson Knox. But let's say you get the Vance McDonald type instead. Well, then that opens the door for Murillo from LSU or an Isaac Nauta from Georgia. So you kind of got to have, like, the tight ends are becoming 2 different positions. As the wide receivers are getting specialized, so are the tight ends. So there's many different options, but I think they would be silly not to look at tight end in this draft just because it does appear to be such a deep and talented tight end class. And I went that entire section without talking about the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, well, and that's the hard part with those Hawkeye tight ends. If one of them if one of them falls to the second round, you run to the podium. Either one of them, it doesn't matter. But the odds of that happening, very slim to none, unless one of them gets injured or does something really stupid, like pulls a Shane Ray and is caught with marijuana a week before the combine or something, or was that before the draft?
That was before the draft. Before
the draft, yeah. So, if you see one of those guys driving around, maybe help us out there.
I did see Nate Stanley again today.
I saw you post a picture about that.
I was like, oh, there he is. I'm not creeping. How dare you put that out there? So,
but no, I mean, like you said, that's the dream. Irv Smith, if he's in there in the second, again, that's another guy you run to the podium. I would love either of those three guys being with the Broncos because that is a huge fix at one of the positions that the Broncos just haven't. When's the last time we had a consistent tight end that you could just put on the field and say that guy's going to be something for us?
Man, I don't know if you can say consistent, but Julius Thomas was pretty good with Manning. Consistent's not the word I would use. I would use explosive and erratic.
Right. I mean, when he was healthy and decided to actually put effort, the guy was one of the best receiving tight ends in all of football.
Yeah.
But how often that happened, we saw as Bronco fans, that wasn't very often.
Is he even in the league right now?
I don't think so.
He retired.
I think he did.
He was a guy who did not love football by all accounts. He got his money. So good for him. But that's the name of the game. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm curious as I more dive into this Scangarello offense. He's, as I talked about earlier in the episode, he's more of an 11 personnel guy as opposed to Kubiak being a 21 and a 12 personnel guy. So you kind of need to, I don't want to say that rules out the pure receiving tight ends, but you really need a guy who can do it all. If we're looking at San Francisco, because George Kittle, a guy that great inline blocker, can match up against edge rushers one-on-one even sometimes, and be a good receiving weapon, vertically stretching the seam, and as well as a yak guy. So, George Kittle is obviously the probably third best, second best tight end in football right now. So that's not really fair to expect that, but I think that does change maybe ever so slightly what the Broncos are looking for at tight end, because I think you got to have at least a little bit of ability as a run blocker. They can't be, it depends on what they do in free agency as well, but if you're looking for that guy, they can't be just a complete no-show as a blocker as well. Right.
No, I'm there with you. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting who would they go after, because it definitely will be a good sign of what they're going to do with the offense this year. But the other position, at least weapons-wise, that's going to be huge for the Broncos is finding that speed at the wide receiver position. That guy that can take the top off the defense, that can really make it where you can take advantage of Joe Flacco's ability to get it to every inch of the field. Because right now, the Broncos really don't have that kind of guy. Hamilton is more your over the middle, 10 to 15 yards down the field kind of guy. Sutton, he can push down the field, but he's not take the top off the defense kind of guy. And I'm trying to think anybody else that really sticks out for the Broncos.
Tim Patrick's actually got decent speed.
Yeah, but it's that long speed where you can't just get, just go flying down the field where you're just like, where'd that guy go?
Yeah.
And, it's kind of like you're looking for a John Brown with hands.
Unfortunately, that's not really an option for Denver.
Right.
Because, we talked about it. I talked about it with Derek, but sickle cell anemia probably rules him out as far as the Broncos playing at altitude. Yeah, there that is.
Right. But beyond that, so I think for the Broncos, most likely if they're going to find a guy, it's going to be in the draft for this position.
Yeah. I do want to throw one name out there. He's really not so much a speedster, but I think that he kind of has some ability it's just some familiarity. And if Sanders is gone, getting a guy that has some veteran leadership that probably won't be too expensive, but maybe a Pierre Garçon. Yeah, he's not so much that total burner, but he does have some vertical ability in his game. And I think at least he will know the offense and come in. And I think there's a very very the floor is not super low with that. He's not going to come in and do nothing.
Right. No, that is a good name. I hadn't thought about that one since the 49ers cut him.
Yeah, that just, connecting dots there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but guy who knows the offense, it seems pretty simple to me. So,
it always makes sense to always look at past teams that the coaches have worked with or past players, because you go towards what's familiar. You go to what's comfortable. And even for the players, who really wants to go to a new team and have to learn a whole new offense, whole new playbook? It just that always isn't always the easy thing to do. So a lot of times they'll go towards familiarity as well. It's why sometimes they'll take lower contracts to stay with their team, all those kind of things. But now let's get to the group I think is probably the most important when it comes to this entire picture of how successful or how much of a failure Joe Flacco is going to be. And of course, that's the offensive line. You and I, we love the trenches. You more than me. I can admit that, because there's nobody that loves the trenches more than you, except for maybe Munchak.
Yeah, maybe Brandon Thorne, who will be getting on the
That's true. That is true.
Here sometime.
But I guess looking at the offensive line, what pieces are missing? Who are you seeing them bring back, or who are they maybe getting rid of from this group?
Well, along the offensive line, there is some talk that the Broncos are close to completing a deal with Billy Turner, so that would be good. A lot of it depends on Leary's contract as well, or his health, honestly, because if he was a clean bill of health, wasn't coming off the injury that he was this past offseason, he'd probably be gone. But because of that, the contract nature, he might be a guy that's almost impossible to get rid of, because how much dead money you'd have to eat with his injury clause in his contract. And it also sounds like Paradis is going to be moving on. So what does that mean? Is McGovern going to be playing center? Is it going to be Sam Jones, who's playing guard, who's playing right tackle? I think there's a lot of fluidity here, and it also depends on, we'll see some cap cuts as well. But I think the offensive line, again, you were not on the episode because you decided to leave me hanging. But no, I'm just kidding. The Derek Clausen episode, he talked about how important this offensive line is, not only for a guy like Flacco, but for a Drew Lock as well. And bringing in Munchak's one thing. Obviously, it's going to be trending in the right direction, especially with pass blocking. But you got to be able to solidify this offensive line and move it from a lower end, middling level type of unit to a stronger unit. Now, are they going to use a first round pick on that? I'm not sure, but it's day 2. That's something they definitely need to look in. And heck, they might be able to walk away with a guy like Juwan James in free agency. So I think that offensive line, in all honesty, is the area that they need to look to improve the most, outside of quarterback, obviously. But if they can work on this offensive line and can continue to improve that and give Munchak some pieces that he wants, that he sees as guys that he thinks can be high-end starters, I don't think that can be undersold.
Right. I'm with you. I think for the offensive line, this is one unit I'm willing to just go spend some money.
Yeah. I
think you have to, especially if you're going to bring in a young quarterback, or even with Joe Flacco too. Any quarterback, you want to give them the time and comfort in the pocket to be able to do what they want to do. So like you said, Juwan James, that's always going to be a big name connected to the Broncos. They tried to trade for him. Was it last year or the year before?
Both, I think, honestly.
Yeah. They've been wanting that guy for a long time. So he's finally becoming a free agent. Broncos don't even have to trade for the guy. I think that they're going to throw as much money as they need to at that guy. You got to look at some pieces that have worked with Munchak before. So it wouldn't shock me to see maybe one or two of the Pittsburgh guys coming into town.
Who are those Pittsburgh guys?
I'm trying to remember.
Okay, you got, I think,
Ramon Foster, right?
Ramon Foster's one, although I think Billy Turner coming in and with Leary. I thought Ramon Foster's a guy I was more interested in when I thought there was still potential that Leary was going to be walking. But that doesn't sound like the case, so maybe him. But I'm more interested in those right tackles that the Steelers have had. They're both under contract right now, but both guys that have been discussed as ones that might be cap casualties. And that is Chris Hubbard, who played with the Browns this past season, kind of as that third offensive tackle, but had success with Munchak before. And then Marcus Gilbert with the Steelers, who, again, another guy might be a cap casualty, but with the influx of right tackles, not only in free agency, but in the draft, might be a guy that you can get in if you miss out on the Juwan Jameses, the Darrell Williams, and potentially even the Jared Valdir tier of players.
Right. No, Yeah, those are guys I could see too. Like I said, they've been connected to Pittsburgh, so they've been connected to Munchak. It wouldn't surprise me either for them to bring back Valdir. I mean, he had a decent season for him. If they miss out on some guy like Jawan James, some of the other top guys that are going to be hitting the market. But no, I do. I think that they'll throw some money at that offensive line. They really should. And I'd be excited to see what that group can do, especially now. Like you said, Munchak, he's the biggest piece.
Yeah.
So you got the biggest piece in place. You got our left tackle in place. McGovern's going to be somewhere in there. And so that kind of leaves 3 positions that you're trying to figure out from here on out.
It's just such a question mark with Leary.
Yeah.
Like that adds so many questions. But I think if you can get 3 good pieces, and if that includes getting Jawan James, then I think Garrett Bowles is average. I think he's trending in the right direction. I know people will disagree, but I think that, this is going to be a big season for him and what Mike Munchak says. And if he doesn't see much improvement under Munchak, then, there's new questions that need to arise from that. But I think that the offensive line will be trending in the right direction. But I think they need to walk away with at least 1 solid starter in free agency.
I'm with you. I like it. Well, that brings us here now to our mailbag questions from our inside listeners. And I loved it excites me when I see the questions that our listeners present to us, because it makes me go, we have done our job. These are the people who are looking beyond the first round to talk about the draft. And I love talking about the first round guys, but at some point, don't you just get tired of, hey, let's talk about Drew Luck. Hey, let's talk about the top cornerbacks in this draft. I like looking at, you and I love getting to those into the or middle round, late round kind of guys that we think could be those rising stars that nobody else is seeing or others are seeing, but maybe they haven't made it to the major media yet. I mean, how many times have we done hey, if we really like this player, then 2 weeks later, hey, keep an eye on this player in the major media.
Yeah. That's life.
Yeah, it is. It is. But again, I love that our listeners really want to look at the mid-round guys and kind of figure out how do we round out this team for the Broncos. And so our very first question comes from CU Buff in Texas. And he asked the question, or kind of made the statement, talk about some corners that might be available in the 3rd and 4th rounds. And I came up with 3 names. I don't know how many you have or anything like that, but first guy I wanted to talk about, he was on if our listeners kind of remember our defensive draft that we did, and I know I got in trouble because I didn't have a very good secondary, but I had this guy in the secondary, and his name's Rock Ya-Sin. And I think there's a lot of things to like about this kid. He's not a finished product. He's a little bit rough. He gets too aggressive sometimes. He can be out of position. He can take a lot of bad steps, but the guy is a competitor. And he's looking to go make plays on the field. He can play some man. He can play some zone. I think he can play slot if you need him to. He can play outside. He's a little bit on the smaller end of things than what you like. But I just love the competitive nature of this kid. Yeah.
No, I don't disagree with you. He's a fun one. I think maybe, a lot of this is going to be sorted out by testing, so we're talking before this, we have all the data points, but I think that Rock Ya-Sin could be a guy that 3rd round, I'd be happy about him. I think where the Broncos are picking in the 2nd round, though, a little too early.
Right.
So we'll see how it fares. I like some of these other names you have here. I'm in Marshall and Isaiah Johnson. I see you're doing a very heavy spin on the Senior Bowl, which I can't blame you because those guys are interesting ones and ones that we have a little bit more data on. But some guys that I want to highlight that were not Senior Bowl invites, one that's getting a lot of buzz and a cover 2 option is probably Joe Williams. Again, if you read these names, you see these guys, you don't really hear their first name. At least I listen to kind of background music when I'm watching tape because I'm watching it sometimes in slow motion and listening to the announcers isn't the most fun, especially when they say the same same talking points over and over again. But Juwan Williams from Vanderbilt is a guy that I really think could have huge potential in a cover two defense. He's from Vanderbilt, like I said, 6'2", 208 pounds. I'm very curious to see how he runs and how his shuttles work, because he is a guy, once you start getting that big and that long, you kind of worry about some stiffness and long speed, but I think he does have some ability there. So I'm really interested in him there. If he has a good showing at Indianapolis, then I wouldn't be surprised if he rockets up, and he might even be in the play for the Broncos in the second round, but he's one that I like a lot. Justin Lane from Michigan State had just an incredible amount of ball production this past season. I'm not really into the big market share stats. I trust tape over some of these analytics, but he had so many contested catches and batted balls at the point of contact, and very long guy, former wide receiver as well, 6'2", 185 pounds. He needs to bulk out, but an interesting guy that I like a lot. And then one that I've been on since pretty early in the season that I think is being slept on. He has some injury issues, but I really love the physicality, the transitions, and the length, and just the power he plays with, especially in a cover two scheme. And that is Jamel Dean from Auburn, 6'1", 210 pounds. Need to see how he runs, but just the physicality and the oomph that he brings on the outside at the catch point. I mean, he does not let guys get off easily. So I'm a big fan of him. And then also another SEC player, Jamal Peters from Mississippi State, is another length cornerback that I'm interested to see test. But right now, maybe, or Jamal Peters, I think that's what I said. But right now for me, I'm looking for boundary corners. I love Chris Harris Jr., and maybe they should be looking for slot guys, but I think slot guys are going to be easier to find. And so I'm looking for a guy that can play on the outside and play that high level. If you're looking for some slot guys, I really am a big fan of Jimmy Moreland from James Madison. I think he could be really good there. But am I looking for a slot corner? How early am I taking a slot corner? That's one reason I'm not very big on signing Bryce Callahan as well. I just why are you moving the best slot corner in the game from ever playing slot? It just doesn't make sense to me. So, but yeah, those are some of the guys that I'm looking for, specifically boundary corners. Juwan Williams from Vanderbilt, Jamel Dean from Auburn, Jamal Peters from Mississippi State, and then Justin Lane from Michigan State. Those are some of my favorites that I'm looking late day 2, early day 3.
Yeah. And that's, why I have Amon Marshall and Isaiah Johnson, because they have that size to be able to play the boundary.
I think Isaiah's going to have to move to safety.
Do you?
I do. I think he's so stiff. He had that good week 1 of practice, and then after that, it went downhill.
Yeah.
Or day 1 of practice. I guess that's what I saw.
The one thing I really liked watching him play was how often, he just kept his eyes on the quarterback for as long as he possibly could.
Yeah.
And so, that sets up well to be a safety if you're watching the quarterback's eyes like he does. But that's kind of why I thought maybe he'd be a good fit at cornerback, too, for the Broncos on the outside, because they like to have their eyes looking. They like those turnovers. And although it's kind of weird, he was a wide receiver, but he has terrible hands. That's probably why he switched from wide receiver to cornerback, but he has terrible hands.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, no, I'm looking more boundary. But again, the combine and how these guys test to do there will be very indicative. But I just keep circling back. I haven't even done a mock draft yet. How crazy is that, Carl? How far we are in this process? I haven't even published a mock draft. I should probably do that this year. Take the low-hanging fruit. But I think Jamel Dean is going to make an appearance in that. I'm a big fan. Okay.
I like it. Well, CMCM91 wanted to know, with the potential holes to fill on the offensive line, can you dive into some of the scheme/mentality fits for the Broncos at offensive tackle and inside offensive line on days 2 and 3 of the draft?
Mentality fits? Huh. What does that mean?
I'm guessing a little bit of, you got Garrett Bowles, who unfortunately gets almost too aggressive at times.
True.
Although I don't know if anybody else has that same mentality on the offensive line like he does.
Adam McGovern.
Yeah.
He whoops some dudes.
He has his moments.
Yeah.
But, it kind of depends if that's what you're looking for. Then there's some different guys. But I guess for me, I'm looking more at the scheme.
Yeah.
And the Broncos needing those guys that can be versatile to run power and zone. And so some names that kind of stuck out to me in those days 2 and 3 of the draft, especially for the zone, Drew Samia of Oklahoma. That guy's fast. His feet, oh my goodness, that guy, he's one of the fastest 300-pound guys. That'll be the big thing for him. What does he come in weighing at the combine? Because if he's 300 and above, then I think he can be a day 2 guy. If he's 290 and lower, he's in some trouble.
I think he's small.
I do too.
But I love watching him. Yeah.
I do love watching him. Another guy, Michael Dieter of Wisconsin, he's about 320, and he moves a lot better than a 320-pound guy should. I love his mentality. If we're talking about mentality, he wants to go out there and destroy people. I love his ability to get to that second level. There's times where he doesn't latch on as much as I would like. He kind of goes more for the punch than he does for, hey, I'm going to hold on to this guy and make sure he doesn't get away from me. And so that led to a couple times where I saw the running back there in Wisconsin get tackled when he shouldn't have. But beyond that, I think he would be a really good fit for the Broncos. Another name that kind of sticks out, Titus Howard from Alabama State. I mean, it's kind of hard to find those really good offensive tackles that you really want in those mid-rounds, because if they're really good, they're going early with how much people need offensive tackle help in the NFL. But Titus Howard there at Alabama State, I know he's rocketing up the boards, but he can play that right tackle spot if the Broncos decide not to go the free agent market. He played right tackle for them for a left-handed quarterback, and he has some decent moments. I need him to firm up his base a little bit more. I saw him get pushed back a few more times than I really like, especially going against that lesser competition. And then one final name I wanted to throw out there, Damian Prince of Maryland.
You took my guy.
Oh, boy. I watched him a little bit today.
Isaiah Prince? Do you mean?
Is that who it is?
Isaiah Prince, yeah. That was like, wait.
Okay. But I really liked what I saw from him. He's an aggressive guy. He wants to knock somebody's head off. Needs to get a little bit better of just, again, some of his footwork. But that's why you bring in a guy like Munchak. Yeah. And so I guess that for me, those would be some names to be watching out for in those mid-round picks if the Broncos decide that they want to fix the offensive line somewhere in there and get a guy that maybe could come in and even start day one.
Yeah, not bad. Some of the guys that kind of stick out for me, one that has some background questions but was really good in the Senior Bowl, that's a really good athlete, might be a little bit small, a guy that needs to move inside, but again, smooth mover, can move to the second level well. Chuma Edoga from USC, I also really like from Arkansas. I'm going to butcher this name so bad. Hajlate Fordholt, definitely a foreigner, a guy that Arkansas did not have a good football team, but I was pretty impressed with him this past season for the interior. Probably one of the better players, probably the best player on that Arkansas team. And Justin Herron is another one that I'm pretty impressed with from Wake Forest. He's a guy that I think offers some good ability from that position. And you have both the San Diego State guys as well. I really think Titus Howard and Isaiah Prince are guys, if you're looking for day 2 offensive tackles, day 3 offensive tackles that, Munchak gets him in there, likes the kid, thinks he's coachable, talks to his coaches, says this is a guy that's going to be putting in the work, then I think that's a guy that could develop into a starting offensive lineman and a solid one just because the tools are there from the athleticism, the movement skills, and the size. But day 1, probably not. That's a guy that you put on ice, that you let hit the weight room and get the technique down. And hopefully you're seeing as a quality starter a year from now, maybe 2 years from now as well. But we'll see. Are there any others that stick out to you as far as some of the offensive linemen?
Those are the main guys right now. Like I said, if they show much talent, they're probably going pretty early in the draft.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's some guys there in that second round that I'd really like the Broncos to be able to take a look at, especially for the interior offensive line. I think there's a couple guys that maybe could be there for the Broncos. Chris Lindstrom, man, I'd love to have that guy with the Broncos. You got Garrett Bradbury if the Broncos decide to move on from Paradis. Those are a couple guys. Eric McCoy is another one that I really like. They're in that second, third round area. So, I mean, there's going to be some options for the Broncos, especially, like I said, on the interior. I know you're big on taking tackles, moving them in, but I think there are some pure guards that just fit well with what the Broncos are going to be doing this year.
Yeah, and talking about tackles moving to guard, another guy that I liked his tape. I'm not sure if he's a zone fit as much as he was a power fit, but I'm eager to see how he tests and everything. But Derwin Gray from Maryland, who is projected, 6'5", 330 pounds, and played left tackle for 2-3 years at Maryland. So he's another one that, again, probably not a tackle at the next level. Not sure he's athletic enough, but has the size, the power, and movement moving people ability that you want from the interior.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next question here from No Fly Zone 2125. And he asked, what tight end and wide receiver could be their day 2 or 3 of the draft that could help the room? I know we need a burner at wide receiver, and what would be some late round gems we could find that could fill some roster holes for us? Elway's good at finding them gems later in the draft or after. So I guess let's start with tight end. And I mean, if we're looking for, again, like you said, it kind of depends on what other piece we're adding at the tight end position. So if you're looking for that kind of actual wide receiver or receiving option, the mid to late round guys, Dawson Knox, Jay Sternberger, are both guys that you really got to look at. The kid from Fresno State, his name's escaping me right now. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Fresno State tight end?
Yeah.
I have not watched a Fresno State tight end. I'll be completely honest. I know a San Jose State tight end, Josh Oliver.
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. I was like,
San Jose State. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
So close. So close. Yes, you're right. That guy. He's another that could be a receiving option. So, I mean, if we're looking for weapons in that sense, then definitely go that direction. Then you talked about if you're looking for more blocking types, Isaac Nuado, Foster Moreau is another one. Very, very good options.
Westco from West Virginia.
Yeah. I'm not a big Caleb Wilson fan. I know there's some. I know last week we had a guest on our show that loved Caleb Wilson. I just don't like the kid.
Nah, he's a no for me. Hard pass.
Yeah.
As far as maybe another guy, maybe Kendall Blanton from Missouri. He's very late, but that guy is just, I mean, he's going to get oohs and ahs from people when he steps on the scale. Yeah, 6'6", 265 pounds. And Zach Gentry from Michigan is another one that interests me in that regard. 6'7", 262 pounds. Just some bigger guys. So it really depends. Also, I do like, he didn't impress me super a lot at the Senior Bowl, but I think, if you're looking for a low-end 2-3, I mean, some inline ability, Tommy Sweeney from Boston College is another interesting one as well. But a guy that hasn't gotten a lot of talk that I wouldn't be surprised if he does well at the combine and moves up boards. But gosh, there's just some questions about his physicality, his toughness. But if you're looking for a guy who can move around, a solid athlete, solid athletic body type all around, let's be completely honest, Elise Mack from Notre Dame, 6'4", about 250 pounds, and they're saying he's going to run about a 4.65, 4.75. So yeah, that's an athlete. That's a seam stretcher tight end. So he's had some injuries, etc. But a guy that I have him circled, and I am interested to see how he tests because I feel like he's kind of been lost in the shuffle, had some injuries. There's some questions about durability, work ethic, not work ethic, but how tough is he? I guess toughness questions is really what it comes down to, not work ethic. That's a different kind of thing. But this is a good tight end class, so I'm excited about it. And he also asked about some wide receivers as well. I'm going to kind of bring it back to you, kind of give you a lob here. You weren't trying to talk about a tight end at Fresno State. You're trying to talk about a wide receiver, right?
Of course.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
It was Keyshawn Johnson. I'm sure probably the biggest standout from the Shrine Bowl this year. He was absolutely killing it, and I'm not sure if he's going to be an elite playmaker. He's not he's not going to run incredibly well, but I'd be very interested in his game. And then if you're looking for some guys that I had, again, you were on the podcast, but we had Derek Klassen on, and we talked a lot, not only quarterbacks is from an analytical perspective, but also the scheme that the Broncos are going to be running. And he said that the speed from that slot position and a guy that can stretch that seam vertically and keep that cover 1 safety or cover 3 safety back and stress them is really important. So I'm looking for some speed from the slot, and guys like Penny Hart is from Georgia State, and it's a crime that he wasn't invited to the combine, but Broncos might get a good deal on him now, where they could draft him maybe in the 5th, 6th round instead of the 3rd round if he would have killed it there. And then a guy like Greg Dortch from Wake Forest, who's small, but man, he was killing it at Wake Forest this past year. And again, small, but great athlete, good route runner. And he's one that if you're looking for a slot that's, you're not looking for that Eric Perkins slot, that's that Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type, but it's rather a Taylor Gabriel type that can stretch you vertically and stress the seam in that regard. That's the type that I think you're looking for there. So two that I'd be looking at is Penny Hart and Greg Dortch.
Some very good names. If we're looking earlier in the draft, you're going to be looking at guys like Deebo Samuel. I mean, that's a guy that you can put all over the field, do a lot of things with him. You can run the football with him. You can pass the football deep, short, everything. I mean, he's one of my favorite receivers in this draft, of course. Marquise Brown, if he's healthy, we'll kind of see how his foot with that Liz Frank injury. Oh, I hate that injury.
Yikes.
Oh, I hate it. Emmanuel Hall, Drew Lock's favorite target. I mean, that kid can fly down the field. Terry McLaurin of Ohio State, another guy. Andy Isabella. I mean, the guy is just a speed for days. I think that's the main thing I love about this wide receiver class is you got a little bit of everything. You don't have those top tier. Maybe DK Metcalf can be that number one receiver, but beyond him, you got your big guys, you got your speedsters, you got your quick guys, you got a little bit of everything. And so whatever you're looking for, you can find it in this draft. Another guy, Dylan Mitchell, he's got some speed there from Oregon. He's got some off the field issues from what I understand. But, I mean, again, there's just a lot of options throughout this draft. If they want to find somebody in the second round, they got some really, really good options. But if they want to find some of those sleeper guys like what you mentioned there, there's some good guys there as well. So it'll be fun to see what the Broncos do to add weapons to this offense. Yeah,
and I kind of teased about it earlier in a different area, but I think that free agency, if you can solidify the offensive line in that regard, bring in a good piece there, you got to do it. But I think that mainly free agency, you get a chance to woo some people in. You get to play behind Bradley Chubb and Von Miller, and you get to play with such great defensive minds as Vic Fangio and Ed Donatel. I think you're more likely to woo some guys in for market value / maybe slightly under on the defensive side, and then look more towards the offense in the draft. But we'll see how it plays out. I think they do got to figure out that offensive line. Also, Carl, I got to come back to something, and I called you out, and I said you got the name wrong. You had the name right. I was thinking of another Prince in the Big Ten. So Damian Prince is from Maryland. I was thinking of Isaiah Prince.
Okay.
For Ohio State, who is a guy, he's definitely a waistbender, can lunge, but very long, very smooth. And he didn't have a great game against Purdue, but I think the tools are there to be a really good tackle. I mean, he's so smooth and has that length. So it's really going to come down to what Munchak wants, Munchak gets, kind of like what Collar wants, Collar gets. But
yeah, I watched him against, I watched him against Chase Young, and I thought for the most part he held his own against Ohio State. That was the one game that made me really take notice of this kid and go, he could be something. I think he's one of those guys. He's not the quickest of feet, so I'm not sure if he can hold up there at tackle like you'd want him to. But I like the tenacity that he comes into each game with. And so, I mean, I don't know. He just kind of stuck out to me. So I'm glad I had that one right. You had me questioning myself.
I was just thinking I was like, oh man, Isaiah Prince is the guy that I want to talk about here. Isaiah Prince, because it was Titus Howard and Isaiah Prince were the two that I was thinking of. And then you said Damian Prince, and you're talking about him, and it kind of sounded like Isaiah Prince. And I was going through my notes, and I'm like, oh, you got the name wrong, Carl. It's Isaiah Prince, obviously. So my bad. I had to come back and correct that. Damian Prince, Maryland. Isaiah Prince, Ohio State.
Okay. Big Ten.
Yeah.
That's what
matters. The only
football
that matters.
All right. Well, our final question today comes from Anuzum37.
Gazoon type.
Yeah. And he asked the question, any chance that Denver maybe takes a linebacker or corner at 10 and trades back into the first round for Locke? And I think we're both in agreement on this. The odds of Locke being there, say, pick 20 or later in this draft is not very high.
I don't know if you saw any of the general media's responses to Mel Kiper, who just projected Drew Lock going to the Redskins at pick 15. But the general consensus was Drew Lock isn't going to be there at 15. So what does that mean about the Broncos trading up at 20 to get him? He's not going to be there. If you want Drew Lock, odds are it's still early to say, but I don't think he's getting past 10. Maybe you have to go up above 10 to get him, but I don't think he's getting past 10. Right. However, I do think this is in play if the Broncos don't love Drew Lock or he goes too early and the Broncos move back up for a Daniel Jones, which I would not do personally, but I do think he is a scheme fit for Scangarello. And if you want that 5th-year option and to get, QB play at a discount because you're on that rookie deal, I think that would be the guy that they do that with. But Drew Lock, I don't see him getting past 10.
Right. He's a guy that has really been getting hyped up more and more as time has gone on. I think earlier in the draft process, when teams were kind of looking at the early part of his season and going, man, this guy did not start out good. And it's now that people are starting to get into those later round or those later in the year games and starting to see, okay, this kid really improved. They're looking at the Senior Bowl saying, okay, this kid was great in interviews, looks like a smart kid, very likable, going to be a great locker room guy. And so his stock is about as high as it's ever been.
And let's be honest, the way this draft process works, at least as far as I can surmise and what I've been told about it, is that these teams, a lot of times, they're out there to fly and see these guys, and they're down on the field, and they're seeing how they're interacting with teammates and how they're going with coaches and how they're going through the drills and just kind of that camaraderie and how people are responding to him. But a lot of times, these scouts, they're out of the media box or the press box or whatever you want, the evaluator box, wherever all the scouts get us be at by halftime, because they already got what they came there to see, and they're going to get more from the tape. And then later on, after the season ends, that's when you start to see these teams actually start to dive in to this tape more and more and get their draft board together and get their rankings and whatnot. So a lot of times what you see is these early draft rankings and stuff like that. That's more media generated than anything. And then as the NFL starts to catch up, so to speak, and actually start to go through these guys' tape, then you see the media correct. So it's not so much that the NFL teams' perception is changing so much as it is the NFL's perception is now being formed, and the media is being made aware, at least some media is being made aware, and that's where you see that correction happen.
Right.
At least that's my understanding of the process.
Right. And so, I mean, as much as I would love to be able to see the Broncos do that, get their linebacker or corner there at 10 and then get Lock at the end of round 1, yeah, it just right now, unless something crazy happens, we talked about it earlier, if he pulls a Shane Ray, then maybe that's a possibility. But beyond that, it's just right now, if they want Lock, it's 10 or earlier. And then they have to figure out their linebacker and corner position other ways.
And it might not be this year. I don't think this is a 1-year turnaround, folks. So you can't. There's enough holes on this team that I just don't see it all being corrected year one.
Right.
So the Broncos can make improvements this year and start to have some more key pieces and another good draft and kind of start to develop that core, not sign any stupid contracts, make progress. That's the big thing, in my opinion. But again, this is Denver. This is a Bronco town, and anything less than Super Bowl aspirations is a bust season. But it's just not where they're at right now.
Right. Well, we want to say thank you guys for sending in your questions. They were great questions. Like I said, loved each and every one of them, and keep them coming because, I mean, we love answering every question we possibly can.
Yeah, thank you guys very much, and we'll hopefully do this again pretty soon, or reach out to us on Twitter, DM us, et cetera, if we didn't get into something specifically that you wanted or you want us to elaborate on something, please reach out to us because, again, we're a bunch of psychopaths that love to talk football. I mean, I've been talking football now for almost 2.5, 3 hours now. So, and I'm going to be listening to these all again as I edit them. So that's life. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment. Your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.